Let me do a quick walkthrough of how to prepare for the final essay and keep the theme in mind based on a discussion I just had with Nestor, and that kind of helped me clarify, and I think it might help you guys too, is basically what we're looking at is how the public is manipulated by skilled messaging to turn them against climate agreements, the science of climate change, and switching to renewables. And that all starts with Luntz. And it's not about facts, it's about talking points. Again, Luntz has paid millions of dollars to interview thousands of voters to find out which talking points really get the desired effect. So when he talks about international fairness, he's getting the desired effect. That is, voters will think that's BS. Other countries are taking advantage of it. An appeal to resentment. When they talk about the economic fallout of switching to renewables, they mean to scare voters. You might want to keep in mind that 40% of the people in America, households I should say, have less than $400 in the bank. So the idea of stressing them economically is scary. So that's a strong point. Trump also uses that in his speech for exiting the Paris Climate Agreement. He uses a lot of Luntz talking points. So you want to get the main focus, though, is what the voters will feel. You'll see that if you look at 7.4. And then when you get into the talking heads, I want you to see the Luntz talking points at work. And this is important because in your essay, you're going to have quotes. That is not just talking point number one, but the specific quote. And you're going to have quotes from these talking heads. And so it's a matter of, basically saying, Luntz talking points are used by politicians to basically push the voters' emotions away from either international agreements, the science of climate change, or switching to renewables. So you're going to talk about how they do that and what the voters will feel. And that will go all the way through the talking heads up through Trump's speech. That's all about political messaging and the same basic threads, toying with voters' emotions, turning them against the science of climate change, turning them against international agreements, and scaring the heck out of them when it comes to switching to renewables, just turning them off. And again, your focus is emotions, what the voters will feel, how that's targeted. It's not about facts, because most of what they say isn't true. And then when we move into the heritage, week 10, we have another level of disinformation, and that is this foundation, which is largely supported by, historically has been supported by ExxonMobil, basically creating all of these arguments that undermine the main arguments for going ahead and stopping CO2 emissions, trying to keep from overheating the world. And they're very, very strong. They know what arguments are most threatening to the fossil fuel industry. The 97%, we've discussed that. Why is that threatening? The medieval warming period, we've discussed that. Why is it threatening for the fossil fuel industry if what's happening now has never happened before? And that's pretty obvious. It's because now we're burning all this gas and coal and stuff and, warping the climate in ways that have never happened. So it's important for them to fudge the data and say, oh, it's been happening all along. Gas and oil have nothing to do with it. So you kind of work through that, and why is it important for the fossil fuel industry to make those arguments? And then you also consider that the Heritage Foundation report is something that's used more by public spokespersons, not voters. So conservative talk show radio host, former Rush Limbaugh, or the late, I should say, Rush Limbaugh, people who have huge audiences and they just gobble this stuff up. Or the writers for Fox News who would use that as kind of a template for their, nightly reporting. Just go to the Heritage and turn it into a, breaking news announcement. So all these things are, the Heritage is basically influencing the voices that speak to the public. And again, they're all targeted to delegitimize. So your goal is to understand how this kind of knocks climate science down. That is climate science in relation to limiting CO2 emissions and stopping global warming. And also, along with that, you can say one of their strategies, which is very clear, is to use a lot of footnotes, makes it look legitimate, but they're often, almost always, either twisted or from people who don't have any credibility as climatologists. That is, they don't publish in peer-reviewed publications. So this is really important. They make it look really, really legitimate, but it's all smoke and mirrors. Deep down inside, these are outlier scientists who've never done any research in climate and published, and somehow they become the sources. This is all about agnotology. So that's another focal point. And then finally, when you get from that, and I have some things about peer review, what it means, what the Woozle effect does, finding better coverage. But again, you're not arguing fact, you're arguing their strategy, how they're manipulating people. And then finally, when we get into the anti-EV and the toxic 10, you're looking at even a more kind of high voltage emotional targeting of voters. Either they're turning them off from EV cars, and the focus is not about facts, it's about how they make people feel. Or they're turning people off to climate science by deriding all of the participants in COP26. And so that's the goal, is how do they kind of leave a bad taste in people's mouths through social media and say, oh, that's baloney, we don't want that. We don't want the electric cars. Oh, look at these frauds going to the Copenhagen conference, all that good stuff. And it's just jiggling the emotions, largely because we only listen to what we want to listen to. Largely, it's preaching to the choir, and people who get kind of consistently right-wing media feed will get reinforced at how awful this climate change stuff is. So you want, again, the focus is not on facts, it's about how they're toying with people's emotions. Be careful with that one, because there's a lot of AP, Associated Press articles linked to these, sketchily funded disinformation sites. So every now and again, they'll have something that's legitimate just to fill up space. So you want to be careful for the legitimate kind of neutral reporting of the Associated Press or AP, and look more, use your ears, use your nose, sniff around and look for the things that are really triggering emotions. I hope this helps you with the essay, because again, it's all about manipulating people. Luntz and Trump, it's going right to the voters, right to the general public. The Heritage, it's giving people like Rush Limbaugh, with 10 or 20 million listeners every day, the kind of quote-unquote intellectual backbone. And maybe the writers for Fox News and other sort of right-wing media to tweak their messages and what they're breaking news saying, just reported that there's no 97%, it's 1/3% of scientists. So get that going. And then finally with the toxic 10, understand how they target and turn people off. Now, and you can come out of this believing or not believing in the threat of climate change. That's not really my point, but you do need to focus on understanding how people are being manipulated, not the facts, the manipulative aspect of this disinformation campaign. I hope this helps you put the final essay in perspective.